Hello everybody, it's Robbie, and I wanted to talk to you today about Mosdos literature. This is a curriculum that we used last year for part of the year. We had finished up our All About Reading Level 4 during our third grade year, and so we then moved into the Mosdos literature program for the last part of the year. So we didn't complete it, but we did use it long enough for me to be able to give a really good overview and review of the program. And unfortunately, I turned the curriculum in, we were using it through our charter school. So I turned the curriculum in before I had a chance to record the video, and I completely forgot until after I turned it in. And I had a viewer, call me out on it, asking where the review was, because I had told everybody that I would do a more thorough review of this. So a friend of mine was generous enough to loan me theirs, so that I could do this. And so I have the fourth grade version here. And so whenever I notice any significant differences between the third and fourth grade, I will mention those, just because those are, what I'm familiar with. I haven't looked at any of the upper grades on this curriculum, but I will tell you that Mosdos does provide literature programs for third grade all the way through eighth grade. And fortunately, they don't actually name them by grade, because they have these precious stones or whatever levels, named levels, in order to indicate what level they're for. So the Opal is what they call the third grade. The Ruby, which is what I have here, is what they call the fourth grade. The Coral is what they call fifth grade. Pearl is sixth grade. Jade is seventh grade. And Gold is eighth grade. And so they don't have a high school curriculum, and they don't have anything below third grade. Below third grade, you're most likely doing phonics. So Timberdoodle actually offers this as part of their curriculum kits. Timberdoodle is, they provide box curriculum kits for preschool all the way through high school, but they don't actually have their own curriculum. They curate the items that they want for the kids based on their research and their experience with their own kids that they homeschooled. So now they've got kids that are homeschooling their kids. So they really do have tried and true pieces and selections in their kits. So it's a good place to start if you're kind of not knowing where to start, and you don't feel like a typical box curriculum is a good fit for you. That's a good place to start. And they offer the Mosdos with both their religious and their secular kits. They have both. So they call them non-religious. I don't know how the secular community really determines what they consider secular, but I will say just non-religious. Okay, so this is definitely non-religious, but the stories that are in here are very virtuous, and they have themes to them, and they're very obvious when you get into the stories what virtues and themes they're trying to bring out in the story. So for that reason, Timberdoodle offers this selection, this curriculum in all of their kits, whether they're religious or non-religious. And I'll give you kind of an example here in just a minute, but if you're a Christian and you're wanting a Christian curriculum, this is not it. But because the stories all have these virtuous themes in them and they're very obvious, you can easily tailor your discussions around these themes and bring out your faith in them, with them. And same thing with, if you're a secular homeschooler, the religious themes are not, the religious aspect is not in this, but you can still discuss the moral aspect and the virtuous aspects of these stories, with your kids without bringing a religious component into it. Every kit consists of your teacher guide, your student workbook, and your reader. And in the third grade level, the readers are divided into 2 books just to make it easier for younger students to handle. It's not really any more content. It's just taking these thicker books and dividing them into 2 sections. And then also the 3rd grade level on the workbook, it's one workbook, but one side has the first student reader to it, and then you flip it over and it's got another cover, and then those pages are right side up at this point, so you can work through the second reader. The teacher guide has 2 parts. One other interesting note is that the 3rd grade level, for some reason the student book is in color, but it's not in the 4th grade level, and I don't know if the other levels above this are black and white or color. I don't know if that's important to you, but I just thought I'd make a note of that. Also, there is a new component that I don't remember seeing last year, and that they have CDs with tests on them that you can purchase separately. They're not offered through Timberdoodle, but you can get them through the website, through the Mosdos website, and I know CBD and Rainbow Resource both carry this series as well, so you could check there. I didn't check to see if they offer the CDs there, but they probably do, I'm guessing. So anyway, let me kind of go through this, some of the individual components here so you can see what they're like. And I suppose I should start with the reader. Okay, so one thing I will note, when we started this last year, my son wasn't real happy with how small the words are on a page. We're actually using BJU reading this year, which is very similar in layout. So this is really more of a traditional approach to reading. And it's very similar in layout to BJU, but their readers have bigger words, which he appreciates. So it's not that he can't read this, it's just if you have a younger student or a reader, maybe a struggling reader, they might be intimidated by the amount of words on a page. So I know in the 3rd grade level, a lot of the teacher manual seems to point to the fact that the teacher reads these stories aloud to their kids. And we didn't do it that way because he was more than capable of reading it. It's just that he didn't like having so many words on a page. So we took turns, so he'd read a page, I'd read a page. Hopefully by this, 4th grade level, they're able to just read this on their own. I don't see anything in here that, would make it too difficult for a 4th grader to read. It seems to be on level. As you go through a story, anytime there's a word that needs clarification, it'll give either a footnote or it will put a box here and have a word bank that will give you, the student, the definition of words that they come across in the book. And the stories are just beautiful, really, really beautiful, like bring you to tears, beautiful. I mean, it really, there was a story I was going to read because it was short, just so you could get a clue here. This one, okay, so Sarah's room, and it's just 1 page. So hopefully this won't take too long, but I want to read it. Sarah didn't like being the youngest in the family. With an older brother and 2 older sisters, Sarah always had to wait for them to do things first. On the playground or in the backyard, she had to wait. Wait your turn, her sister Emily had said when Sarah wanted to go first. When her parents gave her brother permission to ride his bicycle to the park, Sarah asked, "Can I go too?" "Sarah," her mother said, "you're too young. You have to wait until you're old enough." "But when will I be old enough?" Sarah asked. "Soon," her mother said. Sarah thought about it. When she was younger, she had to wait to go to school. She had to wait to learn to read. She had to wait to ride a bicycle. She had to wait to swim in the pool. Now at 12, she still had to wait. She had to wait to sit at the adults' table for dinner. She had to wait for her older sisters to grow out of their clothes, and she was still waiting for her own room. Sarah didn't want to share a bedroom with her sister Emily anymore. When she asked her father about a room of her own, all he said was, "Sarah, you just have to wait." So when her family moved into a new house, her father surprised them all when he said, "Sarah has waited long enough. In this house, she gets her own room." He smiled at her. Sarah, you get first choice. What room do you want? Her whole face smiled back at her father, and she didn't feel happy. She felt the eyes of her brother and her sisters staring at her. She didn't have to wait anymore, but now they had to wait. I like the downstairs room, she said. It was the best room in the house. It had a big window that opened to a field of tall grass behind the house. It had a big closet, too. It was also the only bedroom on the first floor. Once the movers left, everyone in the family helped with the unpacking, carrying boxes upstairs to the other bedrooms or to the rear of the house to Sarah's bedroom. After a while, Sarah noticed that her sister Anne took a long time climbing the stairs with her boxes. Ever since her hip surgery, Anne used a cane. She walked slowly and couldn't carry very much, and Sarah's heart jumped when she saw Anne almost fall coming down the stairs. Sarah liked the downstairs room. She liked the sunlight from the window and the view of the field. She even liked the big closet, but she especially liked first choice. So when her father walked past with a box, she stopped him. "I can't wait to tell you," she said. "I changed my mind. My first choice is to share a bedroom upstairs with Emily. I want Anne to have the downstairs room." When he heard her new choice, Sarah's father immediately held out his arms to hug his youngest daughter. "You didn't wait to do the right thing," he said. Sarah didn't wait to be hugged either. She ran into her father's outstretched arms, happy she didn't have to wait for a hug. Okay, so that's that's one story. And like, you could get into major discussions just on this one story. So anyway, in this lesson, it's a very short story, and they'll throw these in. This is not the main story for this lesson, to be honest. It's just like a little extra with a little small lesson to go along with it. But all the stories are like this. Like, they're really, really rich, and they're really, really good. They're not overtly religious, but they're just, as you can tell, very, very good. And so you'll typically get some of these shorter stories thrown in, and they'll give you some lesson points here. And also the teacher's guide will go into detail about what to talk about in this story. This is the actual story for this particular lesson, Leah's Pony. And I'll just kind of flip through here so you can see how long the story is. And not all the pages have a lot of text on them, but you'll see the word banks pop up here, the beautiful illustrations. There's another word bank. This story was great too. Like, I read this one as well. A little girl sacrifices her pony to save her family's farm because they needed money, and then the whole community comes out to help the family not have to sell all their possessions, and she gets her pony back. Anyway, yeah, it's really good. Okay, so there's some poetry. Usually there's some poetry at the end of a story, and then there's this review section to discuss elements of the book, the story with your student. So there's also a ton of questions in the teacher guide, which let me go ahead and pull that out. This is part 1 of the teacher guide, and you'll see that for this particular story, now each of these teacher parts has this. This is like a scope and sequence for the whole year, and then we go into Unit 1. So it gives smaller examples or smaller versions of the pages that the students are going to be reading from. And I don't know if anybody here watching would be familiar with BJU, but it's very, very similar in format to that as well. So it gives you the lesson that's going to be covered with the story, the themes, the target skill, the genre. It's going to give you some tips on getting started. And then when you get into the main story, you got a bunch of guided reading questions. It'll tell you a summary of the selection. It'll give you the literary components, the narrative elements. And you can go into as much or as little as you want to here. But then as you go through each page, you've got the guided reading questions. So there's always some literal questions and some analytical questions, and they do separate them for you. I appreciate the fact that they've got that because the literal questions are usually the easier ones to answer, and sometimes the analytical questions can be harder, and it stretches them a little bit. At least it does for me, for mine. Anyway, it just continues on. You know, every spread has its own set of questions. If there's any literary components within that spread, it'll talk about them here. It continues on. And then at the end, there's a small text writing about the author, and then the poetry, and then it talks about, you know, the same. It's got the same section here that was in the reader about studying the selection. And then it has background bites, so it goes into Jill's journal. And so in this case, that particular story took place during the Dust Bowl. So this gives a little history on the Dust Bowl. So you have some background on the story. And for me, I'm thinking in some cases this might be better to cover before the story is read. I guess just, you know, use your judgment there. And then it goes into another story. So that's kind of how the teacher's guide works. There's also a student workbook that goes with it. And it doesn't really tell you when to do the student guide or the student workbook in the teacher guide, but fortunately it's laid out very simply in that you've got the first story, Leah's Pony, has all of the work pages for that story in sequential order, and then it goes to the next story, the Super Grandpa, and then it goes to the next story and the next story, all in sequential order. So you can wait until you're done. We always waited till we were done with the discussion portion and reading the story before we started in on these. And, you know, if it took a couple of days, 3 days, whatever, to do these pages, we would do them. In some cases, I might even skip a lesson, but this is where they get the vocab. So if you want to incorporate vocabulary into this program, this is a good way to do it. And from what I understand, you know, learning vocabulary is actually the most effective when it's learned in context. So from reading novels or stories or whatever. So this is going to pull the vocabulary from the story and give them an opportunity to use the words in sentences. One thing about the 4th grade level that was not done in the 3rd grade level is that they start incorporating some cursive. So at this point, they're expecting your student to have some familiarity with cursive and be able to read it. I don't believe I don't know that it actually requires that they write in cursive, and regardless, that would be your choice anyway, but it does actually give vocabulary words here in cursive, and so anyway, I wanted to point that out because not everybody teaches cursive. So if your student doesn't know cursive by this time, they may struggle with reading some of these words. So anyway, just for this first story, you've got the vocabulary section here. Okay, so in this one, they're going to categorize the words they've learned. So they use the tool chest because a worker organizes their tools to make it easier to find them. So they're going to have them organize their words, have some more critical thinking questions related to the story. And so depending upon how deeply you went into discussion, you may or may not want to continue with this. If you need this to be a little more independent and don't get too much into the discussion portion, then this would be a good way to see whether or not there's comprehension there. There's a little bit of writing here. So as the 4th grade level, there's way more writing in terms of answering questions than in the 3rd grade level. There's a graphic organizer, another type of graphic organizer. And now we're into the next story, the Super Grandpa. We start with the vocabulary here. So it's going to continue, you know, with this pattern throughout. And whether or not you think that this is a valuable part of the program is up to you. If you buy it as a bundle, you're going to get it. If you decide that you don't want to have this with it and you just want to do discussion, you could buy the components separately. And one thing that's interesting about this is that because they give this section at the end where you've got studying the selection, this in and of itself really could be an all-in-one literature program if you want it to be more discussion-based. If you don't want, the teacher edition and to go that in-depth into each story, and you want to just kind of do it on your own, discuss as you go, read it together, get just a little bit of guidance in terms of what you want to have the student discuss about the selection, it provides some of this in the student reader. My BJU does not do that. Like if you want any tips and tricks at all or any selection, questions laid out for you, you have to have the student, the teacher guide to do it. This one, you really don't. So if you were, oh man, I like that, but it's too pricey. And so we're looking at $161 for the whole thing. And that includes the test CD, and that's off of their website. So if that price tag is not something that you want to, or if that price tag isn't appropriate for your budget, but you want something like this, then I would suggest just get the book, just get the reader. And if you want to include the vocabulary and have the vocabulary practice, then you can get just these two pieces, which is significantly less expensive. You might be able to find the readers used. At one time, I think before Timberdoodle agreed to incorporate this or worked with Mosdos to incorporate this into their kits, they discontinued this program. And so when I was just looking to see what used options were out there for this. It was just ridiculous, the prices they wanted. I couldn't figure it out. It didn't make any sense. They wanted more for the used copies than they wanted for the new kits. It didn't make sense. And then I found out that they had actually were going to discontinue this. And people who liked it were really upset about that. But now that Timberdoodle has them in their kits, they've, are offering them again. And so you might be able to now find some used copies. There's not a ton out there, though, I'll tell you, because they haven't really been offering this for only just a year through Timberdoodle. But you might be able to find some used options, That I always check, why not? If you can save a little bit of money that way, why not? So the book, the student activity book is only $23 on the Mosdos website. So anyway, I hope that gave you enough of an overview of this, that it answers any questions you might have about it. It's so rich that I don't think we could do this in a year. I just don't think we could. I think we might have to take a couple of years if we were going to do this, just because when we were doing these stories, we would just talk about them. They were just that rich and that beautiful. If you go to the Mosdos website, they have samples, and I think this story right here is the one that they include. This one here, the kid on the bicycle, is called Justin Lebo. This is a precious story too. Obviously, I can't read it, but I don't want to take the time to read it. But go to their website and read the story, see what you think. You can look at samples of the teacher edition as well. And, if you have any questions, let me know. If you want to see a comparison between this and BJU, let me know. We chose BJU because I really did want to incorporate more overtly Christian material into our homeschool. Mainly because the stories normalize our faith. You can talk about your faith all day long, but, having stories that actually show other families that live out their faith the same way we do normalizes it, and that's what I wanted. But I didn't not use this because I didn't like it. I really, really, really actually like this a lot. I like them both for different reasons. And anyway, not only will you get short stories and poetry, but you also get some excerpts from different novels. And I think as the levels get more advanced, you actually get a novel within the program in one of the stories. So anyway, hopefully that was everything. But if you have questions, do let me know, and I'll try to answer them the best that I can. And if you've made it to this point, I thank you so much for coming and spending your time with me. Please like and share this video if it helped you, and subscribe if you're not subscribed. I've figured out some things, some ways to be able to film more often. I needed a new computer system because I was struggling with the editing, which I now have completely set up. And then my filming setup, I've had to make some tweaking, some changes to it. There's a video coming up that, you know, the quality is a little sketchy because I was trying a new setup that didn't work. But this one I think is going to work. And so anyway, I'll quit rambling. You guys have a wonderful day, and we will talk to you soon.